An 89-year-old frail man walked into a café and simply asked for a sandwich. He was treated with disdain and humiliated, but among the customers a wealthy woman was watching the scene closely, her eyes fixated on something on his wrist, and suddenly she froze with her heart racing. She approached him, and when she saw what it really was, her face went pale. The gentle aroma of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the low buzz of customers in the busy cafe. It was an ordinary day, but a strange silence fell over the place when the door opened, revealing an elderly man. His steps were slow, almost dragging. As he crossed the threshold, old JP at 89 was visibly worn out by life. His thin, stooped body carried not only the weight of age, but also years of suffering. His tattered, faded clothes barely protected him from the biting cold of the day, and his shoes, nearly soleless, showed his toes. He made his way through the room with trembling hands, ignoring the disapproving stares of the customers. He passed through the discreet murmurs, which to him sounded like direct judgments. The pain of his empty stomach urged him to keep going. Each step was a battle between his dignity and necessity. JP barely lifted his eyes, fearing the obvious disdain in the atmosphere. He knew his presence was unwelcome, but he had no other choice. Don't forget to leave a like and don't miss any details of this emotional story. Arriving at the counter, he placed his few coins on the surface, the owner of the establishment. Marcella, a middle-aged woman known for her cold temperament, looked him up and down with a disgusted expression. Her apron, once white, was stained with spilled coffee, but the look she gave, she was even more stained with prejudice. "I just wanted the cheapest sandwich, please," JPE said in AWA voice, barely audible over the murmurs around him. His gnarled, dirty fingers fumbled with the coins, trying to project some confidence. Marcelle crossed her arms, her expression stern. "This isn't a homeless shelter, old man," she said in a cutting tone that made JP shudder. "If you don't have money, don't eat." Feeling the weight of humiliation, JP took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "Please, Jay, anything you can give me. I'm hungry." The plea was almost a whisper, but the desperation in his eyes was evident. The atmosphere around him felt even heavier. Some customers whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable with his presence, but no one offered to help. "Do you think you can come in here and ask for free food?" Marcel roared, leaning in close to JPE, her voice dripping with contempt. "We don't have leftovers here. Go somewhere else." The murmurs turned into quiet laughter. A nearby customer shook his head with a sarcastic smile. "That's right, get out of here, old man. We don't want your company." With tears in his eyes, JP froze. He didn't know whether to leave or insist a little more. His stomach growled, and shame consumed him. He felt invisible, as if his entire life was being judged in that moment. The awkward silence that filled the space felt even heavier on him. He wanted to disappear, but his legs wouldn't move. Suddenly, when everything seemed lost and hope slipped away from his thoughts, the cafe door opened again. The entrance of an elegant, determined woman caught everyone's attention. Isabella, with her well-groomed brown hair and wearing a sharp suit, walked confidently through the cafe, her eyes scanning the room with an intensity that silenced the lingering snickers. She had witnessed the entire exchange from her seat by the window, her coffee growing cold as her fury heated. But it wasn't just compassion that drove her forward. It was a glint of metal on the old man's wrist, partially hidden by a frayed sleeve. As she drew closer, her heart began to pound against her ribs. The object was a battered, tarnished watch with a distinctive, almost unrecognizable crest. A crest she knew intimately from her late grandfather's stories and his collection of wartime memorabilia. She froze for a second, her blood running cold with a sudden, staggering realization. Ignoring Marcella, Isabella walked straight to Joe, her previous composure replaced by palpable urgency. "Sir, may I see your wrist?" she asked, her voice gentle but insistent, so different from the harsh tones that had just filled the air. Confused and wary, Joe slowly extended his trembling arm, pulling back the dirty cuff. There, resting on his frail, parchment-like skin, was a military-issue watch. Its leather band was cracked and disintegrating, but the scratched silver case and, most importantly, the engraved emblem were unmistakable to Isabella's trained eye. It was the insignia of the Lost Battalion, a legendary and heroic unit from a conflict decades past, known for a brutal siege where few survived. Her grandfather had been their commanding officer and had spent his life mourning the men he believed had died without recognition. Her face went pale as ash. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her eyes locked on his. Joe's gaze dropped, a flood of ancient pain washing over his features. "It was mine," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength from memory. "A long time ago, they gave it to us." Before everything went dark, Isabella's mind raced, connecting fragments of history with the broken man before her. The records stated all members of that battalion had been accounted for, either confirmed dead or returned. Yet her grandfather had always whispered about one young soldier, a brave private who had volunteered for a suicidal rearguard action, allowing a handful of others to escape. He was presumed obliterated, his name etched on a memorial, but his fate a mystery. "Your name," Isabella breathed, tears welling in her eyes. "Is it Joseph? Joseph P. Ellery?" Joe's head snapped up, a shock of recognition and fear jolting through his frail body. No one had spoken his full name in over 60 years. He simply gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The café was utterly silent now. Every patron and a bewildered, uneasy Marcella hanging on this unbelievable scene. Isabella, a wealthy philanthropist and historian who had funded veterans' causes for years, took Joe's dirty hands in her own impeccably manicured ones. "My grandfather was Colonel Alistair Grant. He searched for you until the day he died. He never believed you were gone. He told us your story, Private Ellery. You are a hero." The word hero echoed in the still air, a stark contrast to the homeless and beggar labels that had just been thrown at him. Joe's eyes, clouded with age and hardship, finally spilled over. The weight of decades of anonymity, of surviving against all odds, only to return to a world that had forgotten him, of living on the fringes with his memories as his only companions, seemed to crumble in that moment. Isabella turned to Marcella, her expression now one of steely authority. "You will prepare your finest meal for this gentleman immediately, and you will do it with the respect he should have been shown from the moment he entered." Then, addressing the stunned room, she added, "This man sacrificed everything for the freedoms you all so casually enjoy today. Your contempt today is a stain on this community." Marcella, shamed and scrambling to correct her monumental error, rushed to comply. Within minutes, Joe was seated at the best table, a hearty steak sandwich with all the trimmings and a hot soup placed before him, along with a cup of the finest coffee. Isabella sat with him, listening as he ate his first proper meal in days. Between slow, grateful bites, fragments of his story emerged. The harrowing battle, his capture, years in a harsh prison camp, a daring escape and a long, lonely journey home to find no family left and his records lost. He had simply faded into the landscape of the forgotten. News, as it does, traveled fast. By the evening, the local news station had picked up the story. A reporter arrived at the cafe, and Joe, with Isabella by his side, gave a brief, humble interview. The segment aired that night, showing the frail man and the dramatic moment of recognition. The public reaction was swift and profound. The narrative of the war hero, humiliated in a local cafe, ignited a firestorm of outrage and sympathy. The following morning, a crowd gathered outside the cafe, not with pitchforks, but with support. Veterans groups arrived in force, their members standing in solemn solidarity. Townspeople brought flowers, homemade food, and cards of apology. Marcella, under immense pressure and genuine remorse, publicly apologized on camera, announcing that Joe would eat for free at her establishment for life and that she would be making a substantial donation to a veterans charity. But Isabella's intervention went far beyond a free meal. She took Joe to her own home, ensuring he had medical care, warm clothes, and a comfortable room. Using her resources and influence, she cut through the bureaucratic red tape. Within weeks, she had secured his long overdue military pension, back paid with interest, and all the medals he had never received, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Purple Heart, and others. A formal ceremony was organized at the town hall, where a high-ranking general personally pinned the medals on Joe's new suit. He was no longer the invisible old man. He was Private Joseph P. Ellery, honored hero. Yet the greatest gift was reconnection. Isabella, through her historical networks, managed to track down a distant cousin of Joe's, a family who had believed him dead and who welcomed him with tears and open arms. Joe spent his final years not in a cold, lonely apartment, but in a warm family home, surrounded by respect and love. His story finally known and valued. The café, meanwhile, underwent a transformation of its own. Marcella, fundamentally changed by the experience, renamed it the Veterans Brew. She decorated the walls with local military history and offered a permanent discount to all service members and veterans. The site of Joe's humiliation became a place of honor and remembrance. Isabella and Joe developed a deep grandfather-granddaughter bond. She often said that finding him was the most important discovery of her life, a living piece of her own family's legacy. Joe, for his part, would often pat her hand and say, "You didn't just buy me a sandwich, my dear. You gave me back my life." He passed away peacefully 2 years later at the age of 91, with his name cleared, his valor recognized, and his heart full. The story of the frail man and the watch became a local legend, a timeless reminder that heroism doesn't always wear a uniform, and that dignity can be hidden beneath the most tattered coat. It teaches us to look beyond appearances, to listen to the silent stories walking among us, and to always choose kindness, for we never know the battle someone has fought. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, Kindness True Stories, for more powerful and emotional tales that remind us of the impact of compassion in our world.